Okay, we're live.
All right, this is Chester Moore with Dark Outdoors, and the last few days, about the last week, I've been getting lots of people contacting me about some strange drowning deaths in the Austin area, in the area of Ladybird Lake. If that name doesn't sound familiar, you might know of Town Lake, which it was called Town Lake until the early 2000s. They changed the name from Town Lake to Ladybird Lake, and immediately, because of the demographic and the situation of the people who were younger men in this, I thought of the show I did last year with my friend William Ramsey of William Ramsey Investigates of the Smiley Face Killers. So I reached out to him. It turns out, of course, he's already on the case, and he was kind enough to call in and connect. So, William, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Chester, it's great to be with you again. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, I hate that we have to meet in such bizarre circumstances all the time. But this is something that's hit my home state area. I used to frequent, not the party district, but I used to work with Texas Parks and Wildlife a lot in their headquarters in Austin. Very familiar with that lake and that area. And it seems there's been a stream of bodies in this Town Lake area, this Ladybird Lake, under some of the same mysterious circumstances that you and I have talked about before.
Indeed. Very
Mhm.
many recently, actually, within the last 2 or 3 months. And as you know, you've been to that lake. It's not a menacing lake. It's almost like a big pond.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not, it's barely like a wave over an inch tall. So if people fell in, they could probably get out. But there have been really a lot
Hmm.
there. And it's
Hmm.
brought the attention or to the attention of people in Austin. So they
Hmm.
are calling this stream of deaths the Lady Bird Lake Killer. They think
Yep.
it's, there's a rumor of a serial killer there. Some of the names are Jason John,
Hmm.
Jonathan Honey.
Hmm.
There was another Cliff. I forgot his last name, but there's been, and this is kind of a recent spate. There was 3 in a row in 2018.
Hmm.
It was Lex Fold White and Gutierrez, Martin Gutierrez.
Hmm.
And there's been some other ones as well. So there's definitely something going on there now. And there was actually a young man who survived possibly being drugged. He had no memory of what happened to him over the 60 hours he was missing. His name was Christopher Pugh. So he's
Wow.
not included in these kind of
Hmm.
known deaths.
Hmm.
But this, is really, and there's a huge Facebook page you can read about all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
speculation going on. Ladybird Lake Killer, 66,000 last time I checked, 66,000
Yeah, it was like
subscribers.
60,000 when I checked last time. And I've also heard the name there, the Rainy Street Ripper, because it's
There you go.
connected to Rainy Street, which is down there by Town Lake and that kind of party district of Austin. And the one that came across my desk, so to speak, was the Jason John case. That's the one that made me kind of stop and go, oh, man, this is because you and I communicate when I see something weird in the news related to this. I'll send you an email. And I saw another one pop up. Like, I need to get him back on. But for the listeners who are not familiar, you can go back and listen to the Smiley Face Killers episode from season 1 of Dark Outdoors. Just explain real quickly the Smiley Face Killer phenomenon and why we would even consider tying it in with what's going on in Austin.
Right, good question. It goes back to 2 people who investigated it separately.
Mm-hmm.
One was a guy by the name of Gannon, who was a New York police officer, and
Mm-hmm.
the other was Gilbertson, who is a criminologist in, I think it's either Minnesota or Wisconsin, who saw this phenomenon. So
Yeah.
they independently were researching and got together and said, "Hey, there's something going on." Gannon, the kind of one of the first cases known, was a guy by the name of McNeil,
Mm-hmm.
who was a Fordham student in 1997 in Manhattan, who disappeared out of a bar, was later found downriver, floating up, face up, which is very strange for people who drowned and very
Mm-hmm.
suspicious. And actually, there was an autopsy that found that he had been really abused, like tortured, before he was found in water.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't really a water death. And the person who looked at his autopsy is a very well known pathologist by the name of Cyril Wecht, and said
Mm-hmm.
that the guy had been burned. So they noticed this pattern of young men disappearing later to be found in water, and they also noticed that there was a smiley face associated with where these people went in water. So that's how this phenomenon
Mm-hmm.
got the name Smiley Face Killers.
Yeah.
And so it's grown. And so then they researched it. They did a case studies, very detailed case studies. People could read their book. I highly recommend it. It's
Mm-hmm.
called Case Studies in Forensic Drownings, and they did 14 cases. But that's kind of like the first book that was put out about it. But then it kind of grew, and people were noticing cases happening in other places. I was watching it as well. I thought it was an urban myth.
Yeah.
I thought that these people were literally falling in and drowning. And then I started studying it myself and realized This is much stranger than that. They are not even, some of them aren't even in water, and some people haven't been drinking, which is even stranger. So you would think if they're not drinking and they fell in water, they would just get out. Much like the Ladybird Lake. It's not a menacing body of water by any stretch of the imagination. So I studied it. I hooked up with Jim Smith, who's on Twitter and follows a lot of these cases, and I put together 2 documentaries.
Yes,
the first documentary I put in a pretty thorough, I would hope to think thorough documentary. Was 3.5 hours long. It's probably too long, but it goes through 88 cases, so you can kind of see the pattern, and that's available on Vimeo or Amazon. And then I followed up over COVID when I was locked in with a second one called The Global Slaughter Continues, because this phenomenon is happening all over the world where young men are disappearing. So it's kind of a mystery as to the motive and what's going on, but then it's just flared up after kind of COVID ended. Really, there's been a lot in Chicago, and a lot of new researchers have gotten involved, just like we were talking about 60,000 or whatever on Facebook looking into this. A lot of vigorous, like very intense researchers mapping out a lot of cases that have happening. But Chicago, there's probably been 10 suspicious drowning, and a body was found yesterday, a guy by the name of Arce, A-R-C-E. So I've done a recent show on that. There was a young man who disappeared in Chicago. His name was Seamus Gray, and they haven't found his body yet. He literally just disappeared off the face of the earth on St. Patrick's Day. So that's kind of disconcerting. So this phenomenon's happening. Something's happening in Austin, and there's been videos. I can bring up a video if you want to look into it, of a guy who found the body. He wasn't in the water. So there's a lot of information that the public isn't getting, that there's information that, are these other researchers are finding out, basically. Let me see. I can pull up the slideshow. This is kind of my slides. Do this. Yeah. So you can see here, this is like people asking questions in the media. A serial killer at Ladybird Lake. Austin police say no foul play in latest death. But you can see this kind of like in the background. This is the Dallas, Texas TV. Austin residents concerned after police find second body in Ladybird Lake in a month. But I'll show the video. And then there's this video, which I will show. This is a comedian in Austin. His last name is Faust, and he's asking people on Rainey Street, is there a serial killer? And it's pretty chaotic there. It's like really crazy. But I'll show this video too. This guy's just going and questioning and asking people. But this is John Honey. He was found. He was on Rainey. I think he was in town for like a bachelor party, later to be found in water. And then this is another recent victim, Jason John. This is one of the older victims. His name is White, Christopher White. And then Martin Gutierrez. Who's like, these are young, healthy guys too.
And that fits the pattern, because this pattern that has been associated with what's being called the Smiley Face Killers are basically like late teens to early 30s?
Yeah, like college age, somewhere around there. Usually, I think it coincides with college because they're no longer at home. So like they're out, they're able to go out at night without parental oversight and stuff like that. Although some of these guys, it goes all the way up, like Randy Lexvold, who died in Austin, was I think in his 50s, but he was a healthy guy. But you can see this guy doesn't look like somebody who'd have trouble swimming out of a pool at all. He's got no body fat.
Well, the thing that struck me about, like when I watched your documentary, looking at these water bodies, and some water bodies have actually been by rivers and things. If these were just drownings, well, how come they're getting sloshed and drunk every weekend in these spots? How come people aren't just falling and drowning all the time? And how come there aren't women falling and drowning and doing this stuff?
Good question.
And so when I see that pattern pop up, I'm like, oh man. And and Austin is a town known, it's a college town, of course. It's a large metro area. It's a destination town. A lot of people go there to party. And Austin has this body of water that runs right through the middle of it. But you're right. It's, it's a lake. It's fishable. It's whatever. But it's not some giant waterway. And to have these bodies pop up like this. Now, what caught me on a couple of these, you had a guy who was found 8 days after he went in. Then the other one was found the next day. If my understanding is correct, most of these associated with the Smiley Face Killers have been found, numerous days. But have you had cases before where like they were found the same day or the next day or anything like that before?
Some are included. I think there are accidental drownings. I do believe they happen, but those are more obvious. The real thing, that the giveaway of some of these are something other than just falling in the lake, is when they're found 9 days later. Bodies decompose.
Yeah.
Even if it's cold, they will usually float to the surface or be found. That's just natural state. That's not to drop. It's very unusual. So then, and oftentimes some of these people are found in places that have already been searched. So there's massive searches. Very common with these losses is the family members panic, justifiably so. They get the police involved. They do a massive search. They can't find the body. And then it shows up in the same place somebody else has already searched. So that's kind of a giveaway that something strange is going on. Well, and I think that probably happened with this guy, Jason John. Yeah.
Jason John. Yeah. That's the one that got on my radar first here, seeing the news report of it. And just from you done these exhaustive documentaries, which I love, they're great. You need to go out and check those out. I'll put the link up here. From seeing what's happening in Austin, are there any things emerging from what you've seen so far that really match other patterns in other cities, perhaps some of the things in Boston or other areas that have happened before? Are there certain things that just definitely add up, or do you have some questions still?
Well, I would say that the cover-ups are very similar in these college towns. Chicago, Boston, the authorities denied anything has happened when they've had probably 30 strange deaths there that really would make people panic. Yeah. Same thing happened in Pittsburgh. So it seems like the authorities really do not really want to address this. And there was a public statement in Austin.
Yep.
I can pull that up, but they said there's nothing going on. And so I had a really clever guest liken it to Jaws, where the city guy is like not wanting to admit it because it's going to hurt business.
Yeah.
And create fear. So, yeah, and I think that something like that is happening behind the scenes. I have really no personal evidence. I just kind of surmise that something like that is happening. But I would say that's a similarity. And also just the kind of nature of these cases where some of these people are acting very strange. So this is Martin Gutierrez's death, but somebody says, surveillance video reportedly shows missing Austin man behaving strangely before disappearance. And so that's kind of an indicator that he has been drugged. And some of these people say, like, he's not like that. Or they'll say something about their family member, like, oh, he doesn't drink that much. And so you'll see that with these cases. Seamus Gray, the most recent disappearance that happened in Waukegan, north of Chicago, like I mentioned earlier on St. Patrick's Day, he was acting really strange. He got kicked out of the bar. He was wrestling with a guy in the street at 2 a.m. Like, even drunk, that would seem strange. I'm wondering I don't know his family. I'm wondering if anybody knows if that's really out of the ordinary, because if that's the case, he might have been drugged too.
Well, there was the case on the Oxygen series, and I forget the name of the guy. It was a guy who was a former Navy guy or something, and he was coming out of a game. It might have been in Boston, and they had the footage of him, and they said he had a couple of beers, but he looked like he had 50 beers when he walked out of that thing.
Right. And there was Kelleher in there in Boston, TDI Center, Hurley. So these guys, and weird thing happened with Kelleher was his phone pinged going south when he was trying to go north. So that was on one of the giveaways. And Hurley was like sitting on, this is one of the first cases, he was just sitting on a street corner waiting for a ride and just totally disappeared, like off the face of the earth, and then was found in water. Yeah, really creepy stuff. So there's like suspect stuff in these cases too. Like, what's John doing? Where was he? This most recent guy, Honey, was like last seen at a taco stand.
Yeah.
Like, you're at a taco stand standing upright, able to eat food, and then you're suddenly drowning in water. Like, how does that work? Like, that's the whole thing, that the whole myth of the drownings is maintained in the public, is that they think it's very easy to kind of imagine in your mind, like a drunk guy falling in and passing out and going down. But that's not the case with these cases. So you see even the Seamus Gray surveillance video, he's able to walk and look at his phone. So he's not that drunk. He's able to kind of tinker around. I don't know what he's doing. Same thing with Dakota James in Pittsburgh. They're walking and looking at their phones. And then this guy, Honey, is able to go get food. So he's not falling down drunk. So how does he end up in the water? There's a lot of questions there. So you see these similarities in the kind of, there's a variation between the public perception, what the police know, and the actual real facts of what happened. So.
Well, what's interesting looking back, and the couple interviews I've done with you before in looking at this situation in Austin, is that you mentioned there was kind of a sort of a gap during the COVID era, which would almost suggest that people that might be doing these things are traveling, because there was so much travel shut down and people obviously weren't gathering as much, like in bars and things. But you had mentioned before a case that happened around the Arnold Classic in Ohio.
Yeah, Joey LaBute. That was the first case I looked at.
Yeah, and you know that those are big events where people come in and out. And even this guy here, the Honey guy, they were from out of town. He was in a group and got separated from a group, and things like that. So it's almost it's really interesting to me of the idea of people from out of town coming to these places to do these kind of things and leaving,
Right. I agree
because
with, yeah, I think people have suggested like bands, like
yeah.
there's been cases of bands like playing
Hmm.
and maybe somebody dying and then leaving. Like it's really kind of the perfect crime. If somebody's a very sophisticated
Hmm.
criminal, they could do something like that. So,
And you have like
that,
serial killers that have been numerous ones have been truck drivers and things because of the jurisdictional issues of traveling across state lines, especially in the days before there was so much connection to law enforcement through the internet. Another crime like bam, we're doing this, we're on business, leave town, leave out of here. But do you think, obviously no one's proven anything on this thing yet, especially here in Austin as it's emerging, but do you think, and I know the answer to this, so I want the listeners to hear that this is a serial killer or this is some kind of method that has been shared in the underground, or is it groups or all of the above?
I think it's groups, and I think
Nope.
it's shared in the underground. And there's
Okay.
a very recent article, interview with
Hmm.
Gannon and his former, like, police officer Duarte
Hmm.
on Chicago Barstool. So I think it's like an adjunct to the Barstool Sports
Hmm.
thing because the interest in Chicago is high, just like Austin.
Yeah.
And so that interview took place in January, and
Hmm.
he has information I don't. He's been
Hmm.
researching it a lot longer. Has really been on site, but he said that he has evidence of the dark web connections. So
Okay.
he says that there's communication in the dark web, that there's other symbols involved other than the smiley face. So there's something else going on too.
Hmm.
He mentioned 13 symbols. I have no clue what he's talking about. He probably knows
Hmm.
more than that. Obviously knows more than me. And then he also said that there's numerology, which is very kind of in line
The cult.
with my other kind of occult studies. They are much,
Hmm.
I mean, Christians are involved in dates, Easter, uh, you know,
Hmm.
very other important dates in the Christian,
Hmm.
yearly calendar. So
Sure.
I assume these occultists have the same kind of thing. So he is saying something like that. So I think that he knows that it's an MO, but also shared
Hmm.
by groups. So it's a kind of new crime that's never really been seen before in human history,
Hmm.
because of it's something that happened, like you said, travel
Hmm.
and also communication. The ability of people to communicate and share kind of criminal knowledge has never really been like it has today. So other interest people we can talk, thousands of miles apart. Imagine if you're kind of a criminal in the kind of BDSM, gay underground, or something like
Hmm.
that, and doing this.
Hmm.
So I think that's communicating. They're communicating. There's one guy who got caught abducting somebody in Michigan. His name was Latunsky. He did
Hmm.
unspeakable horrors to this young kid in the LGBT community. It's easy to remember his name because it's the same name as the famous actor Bacon, Kevin
Hmm.
Bacon. His name was Kevin Bacon, but you can see his social media. He was in communication with similar like-minded people all over the place, and they like did
Hmm.
weird howling at the moon type stuff. Like they thought of
Wow.
themselves as wolves. Yeah,
Wow.
really very kind of strange niche kind of ideology. So I think something's going on, that this is evidence. I mean, these deaths are kind of evidence of sophisticated criminal thought with a lot of pre-thinking. Like, these are not these aren't crimes of passion. These are crimes that people have thought it through, and it ties in kind of my research into the O9A, which
Hmm.
is a satanic cult, which has the same thing. It's now communicating all over the world.
Hmm.
People are still going into it, but they believe in kind of doing a human sacrifice. They call it an offer, and you're supposed
Hmm.
to do it and not get caught. And some people
Hmm.
have been caught doing it. They've been caught with this, having that same mentality where they view these things as a human sacrifice. So something like that may be involved. And they have like secret writings where you get on your motorcycle, go into another city, commit crimes, and leave, and try not to get caught, which would
Wow.
tie right into what you said, just a few minutes ago.
Yeah. Like it.
So the average person wouldn't think like that, or a cop
No.
wouldn't think like that, or law
No.
enforcement. But if you're in the occult underground, you might come across some of the secret knowledge. And I came across it because I would just read through it. So I know it exists. And it's in
Hmm.
my book, Global Death Cult. People can read about that. But so there's a very strange group of people. And like this guy, Koberger, if you remember, the 4 deaths that all over the news in Moscow, Idaho. Remember that? Those 4
Mm-hmm.
college kids.
Yeah.
Well, there was a death earlier before those college kids, about 3 months earlier. That was a smiley face killing death. Literally, a kid across the street from where those murders happened.
Oh, wow.
So Kohberger may be involved in much more stuff, and he was traveling all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
He was traveling. This is just ties into your theory. He was traveling from Washington to Idaho and driving back to his home base in Pennsylvania. So if he's a serial killer, how smart would that be? Like, you commit crimes in these different jurisdictions and keep moving. And somebody said, and I don't know the whole facts about everything about him, but they said that he got into criminology so he could learn to be a better criminal instead of like wanting to like be a
wow.
Yeah, so he's a strange bird. But there's pictures. I think that the cops were onto him for a while, and there's actually videos of him getting pulled over by the cops, and he's driving, across country, just like some of these other crazy killers that did that stuff.
That's really interesting. And one of the things that's intrigued me in particular about this movie into like this going into Austin and some of these areas is like rolling back and looking back how long some of these things could have been going on without it making any kind of splash, because no one had ever heard of this modus operandi. And I know you said you believe before that this basically kind of maybe came along with the birth of the internet and the ability to share information and things like that. But it kind of makes you think about different crimes you might have heard of that were unsolved around water that you just assume, well, they're drowned. That's what happened.
My understanding is that you could go back and look through New York City, and apparently the mob used the water to like dispose of bodies. So that was a common way to do it because it got rid of evidence or confused the cops, or they wouldn't find the body. So I think other kind of criminal, types were doing that in the past. But this is kind of a different thing where they're not like criminal rivals or something in another mob. This is like guys, victims coming from bars who were in a vulnerable position. I mean, but you're right. You had to kind of go back through and look at all these old cases to kind of see. And there's other cases that keep popping up. Like, I didn't know some of these cases that happened in Canada. And there's similar modus operandi deaths like of this type that don't involve just men. There's a lot of indigenous, what we would call Indians or indigenous deaths in Thunder Bay in Canada. They've had like 10 body dumps like that. Like this. So it's like somebody who's criminally minded, like figured out how to, trick the cops or something like that.
Yeah. And because of perhaps the internet and the ability to share things on like the dark web, which I wouldn't even know how to get on the dark web. I mean, like, you hear the word, what is that?
There are ways to do it. I haven't gone on to it because I don't ever want to get.
I don't want to get associated with
busted. Yeah.
Anything in that realm. But like, the people who are apt to do that, to be able to share these things before, where if someone was apt to want to live out their sick fantasies, had to kind of figure on their own. And now people can go back and look at cases and go, well, this guy did this and didn't get busted or whatever, and to me, that's horrifying. Now, you'd mentioned that there were also some cases in Houston, which is right down the road, an hour and a half from me. I'll be in Houston tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Spend a lot of time in Houston. The Office, Texas Fishing Game magazine that I work for, is actually based out of Houston. And, once again, university town, huge metro area. At the hub in America of human trafficking is Houston, Texas. Our ministry does some work with girls that have been through trafficking. We use our animals at our facility to help minister to girls that have been through trafficking. And, we just know because of the channels that we work with that Houston's a hub with a major port, major airports, a big interstate running through it. So it definitely wouldn't surprise me that some of these things would pop up in that big Houston metro area that has a lot of water around it, by the way.
Right. Well, this is one case, Ridge Cole, and somebody sent this. This is a poster. It says Ridge Cole was a huge one. He wasn't drinking at a bar. He was from out of town and at Houston Hospital campus for medical care for his son. So this is like another out of towner. Like maybe somebody figured out he was out of town. He was found in water. So there's a couple other cases as well as this guy in Houston. I just don't have them available right now. But it's happening all over the place. People really need to be concerned. Like more and more cases are being found.
Well, that's why I wanted to have you back on, only because it's in Texas, because my realm here in the Dark Outdoors podcast is the outdoors world. And this is water. People fish on Ladybird Lake. People fish and kayak and spend time in these different kind of areas, and are people that might be apt to potentially seeing a body dump or seeing some kind of a clue that maybe someone wouldn't see. So hopefully getting some of this information to some outdoors lovers, number one, will make them think before going to party too hard at one of these bars. Number two, they may see something while they're out there fishing on a kayak that goes, hey, you know, that looks a lot, I heard something on that podcast. Maybe I need to report that or something like that.
Right, and I talked about that on my last show. Is people need to keep an eye out for these symbols and things, and just be aware of what's going on. There's just so many strange things going on. Let me see if I can find this video. This is kind of an interesting video. This is share this up. I have to change my settings. Hold on.
No worries.
All right, let me play this video. This is interesting. This is a guy on site. He saw like all kinds of weird satanic signs, and he literally found the body.
Is when I noticed the guy in the like a black hoodie. He wasn't large or anything. It was just a guy in a black hoodie, just kind of super concerned about what was going on over here.
Was he here prior to you getting here?
If he was, I don't remember. Like, mind you, I wasn't paying too much attention to that area.
Your focus is over in this realm.
I was walking down here because this is my spot.
Okay, so what about this graffiti?
So that's another thing. So when I posted the picture in the group chat, I didn't notice any of the graffiti on here, but then someone pointed out that there's actually, you know, satanic graffiti here. There's like a 666, and whether or not it was here before the incident happened, I don't know. But the person who pointed that out did tell me that here, back in the, you know, the Riverside, Montopolis area and all the homelessness, there is a known satanic like cult type thing. Okay. There's lots of satanic occult symbols that are graffitied in the one of the tunnels that are there.
But you didn't see anybody spray painting this?
Anybody come over here and spray paint anything like that? This was already here when I came over.
Okay.
Yeah, this was everything.
And the gentleman who was over here, what did he look like?
I mean, it was dark. The sun had already gone down at this point.
So that guy wasn't here when you first got here. It was just this guy.
If he was here, he was up
hiding
there waiting.
Okay.
Just hanging out.
Gotcha.
You know, but whenever I was over here and I started the phone call and I came over this way, he was extremely concerned about what I was doing over here. And
did he say anything to you?
No, because he was gone before the police came.
But he was looking at you and watching what you were doing?
Definitely looking. I was looking for lights on the street. I was waiting for the police to come. So I was half paying attention to him, half paying attention to the lights, you know?
Gotcha. Okay. And how long after you found the body did you actually call the police?
Maybe an hour and a half, maybe.
Okay.
An hour.
And that's how long after you realized that it was a dead body did you call the police?
When I was 100% for sure it was a dead body, I called the police.
Okay, gotcha.
And 50-50 chance we were now, mind you, I'm just being 100 here. We were making jokes.
But he was found on the land, not on the water. So that's
he wasn't in the water.
Cat, lighthearted stuff, you know, like this could or could not be, you know, none of us really thought it was an actual past unalived person out here. But unfortunately, that's what the situation was.
Were there any signs of physical trauma to the body? Were there needles around?
There were no. Okay, there was no.
Thought it might have been fentanyl or something.
Only the liquor, only the vodka.
The liquor. And then someone pointed out to me that the guy actually had like decent work boots on. His clothes looked all messed up or dirty, and his belongings were actually quite nice. I think in the picture there's a laptop that's somewhere like right over here.
Yeah.
So he may not have been a homeless person. You know, he could have been a migrant worker. Or, I don't know what, but
was it a white guy?
Well, when I found him, he was a gray guy. So I want to say white or Mexican. I want to say he had short cropped hair.
What about the guy over here? Was that
just a hoodie?
That's all you could. You couldn't tell the ethnicity, but you could tell it was a male, though.
I could tell it was probably a male. Yeah.
Okay. And there was no blunt force trauma to the head or any blood or anything like that.
There was nothing that would indicate that wasn't just a passed out drunk person.
Okay. So Did the body seem bloated?
No, I don't have a lot of experience with bodies,
Yeah,
so I don't
neither
have
do
a
I.
lot of frame of reference. But he didn't. I did remember that from the time that I first found the body, the color had slightly changed.
So it could have been a freshly dead body. What did the police say when the police got here?
They just asked what I was doing, why I was down here. I just told them I was playing guitar.
Well, the Austin police wouldn't care if you were smoking pot anyway. Did you tell the police about the other guy that was here?
I didn't, because I didn't think about it, all of this until after the fact. I was kind of in shock. I posted the picture.
And you were stoned.
And I was stoned.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'll lend you some.
You know, if you want to.
A buffer.
But I was also kind of in a little bit of shock. I just tried to give them the information that they asked for so I could leave.
Yeah. You know? I know. Yeah. And I get where you're coming from. I've dealt with the police a lot, unfortunately. Do you think that this is connected to any of these other bodies they're finding?
I don't have a lot of information about what's going on with the other stuff.
Okay.
But
you think this guy could have been drowned? And do you think that the dude that was here, very interested in what was going on, is at all related to this?
He definitely wasn't drowned because there was no wetness. So
Okay.
It wasn't like the body was pulled out of the lake or anything like that. The guy, whatever happened here where it happened. And I'm convinced that the guy that was over there definitely had something to do with it. And I just stumbled upon something
a potential murder, but
after the fact.
Okay.
That's just speculation.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like the benefit of actually kind of going
Wow.
into and looking, talking to people yourself.
I may head to Austin myself here in the next couple of weeks and go
so
talk to some
keep an
people
eye
on the
out.
streets.
Yeah.
You know, the interesting thing, just pure speculation, but watching this, I didn't catch the whole video, which I'll go back and watch, but it sounded like it was after dark. This guy goes down there, and it's almost like, did he walk up on a body dump or the body about to be disposed of and put in the water? Just a lot of unanswered questions. But one thing I have learned, and when I first went to college for journalism many years ago and got into doing wildlife investigative things, I always thought, no, if you definitely don't want to always just take that bizarre rabbit trail first. You want to let the facts. I've kind of learned the stranger stuff is, the more true it seems to be these days. It's almost
There's strange things happening in the world. There's no question.
It's almost like, well, I better really look at this because it's really weird, and that stuff usually ends up having some kind of basis of truth, And
Well, I know the feeling, man.
It's like, man, and it's but this whole idea of this modus operandi of maybe trading the dark web and going to these areas and targeting these young men and things like that, and maybe ties in with groups like the Order of Nine Angles or these different underground groups.
Right.
Something that's interesting, like we saw, so I couldn't really see what the symbols other than the upside down cross. I can make that out on these trees you mentioned.
I think it's that 666. I think there was a 666.
Okay. When you think about the symbolism and the smiley face icon and things like that, I know that there's been talk in occult circles. I watched on your video about some of these people believing the need to pollute the atmosphere, which is really hard to get my head around. But do you think in some of the symbolism, even the smiley face thing, do you think some of this is to create an after effect of terror?
I think so. I think that might be the intent by some of them, and to kind of, they would call it in the 9A, like facilitate long-term change, aeonic change.
Okay.
So like taking Christians out of the game or killing them or people they think might be very successful.
Yeah.
They're doing their part where they can't have any political power. This is maybe their way of changing society.
Wow.
Society that might be that dark.
Scary stuff.
You mentioned things like unknown groups. There may be unknown groups. This guy Latunsky, who I mentioned earlier, he may be part of some group that is just like a group of 10 guys doing stuff. Who aren't even named in the public. Like, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing about this, whoever's pulling this stuff off has got brains, because they're doing it in a way that obviously hasn't led to any. Hasn't led to a whole lot of prosecutions here.
Right. Well, somebody may have been busted, but they just didn't get busted for all their crimes.
Like
there was one guy who just got finally sentenced in Toronto. He got caught for one, but how many other ones did he do that they didn't tie him to? His name was William von Nudegem. So some of these guys may get busted. They just get popped for one. They don't get popped for all the serial killers.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thought about tying all these things together. But I think it's important for documentaries like you. We'll put those links up in the podcast and all these things to be out there to make people think, especially young men in this situation. Be careful, because I think young men often think, almost always think, they're invincible.
Yes.
And whereas a lot of young women maybe think, well, let's hang out in groups and stay together, even when we go to the bathroom at a club or whatever.
Watch our drink all the time, right?
Yeah, and men don't. So this is something certainly to circulate in terms of information and things like that. But it also, to me, just speaks of like a new wave, a new kind of threat that is that it's out there that we haven't maybe thought about, people thinking things out this far, and the mystery of all this and the difficulty of connecting dots. These are not easy cases. And I mean, if I didn't know of a potential thing like the Smiley Face Killer phenomenon, and I just heard drowning in the lake, I'd leave it at drowning in the lake. Right. But now if I look at the headline and it's like, 28-year-old drowned in the lake, hold on a second, young male. And then the next week it's a 30-year-old, it makes you want to, maybe there is definitely something there. And once again, my audience, outdoors people, if you're out there and you see anything bizarre, even some symbolism like occult stuff or smiley face symbols, and you think it might help a case or whatever, send that information to authorities and things like that, or whatever, document what you can. And but something that I have to ask, because when you go into multi-jurisdictional, even international things like this, it seems like it would be impossible for some of these cases to go on without someone potentially in law enforcement overlooking things, being involved in things.
Well, there was in the Dakota James case, there was there was a Secret Service agent showed up to the district attorney with the mother.
Really?
Oh yeah, that popped up. And then, so I don't know what's going on, but you just said about taking pictures. Somebody took this picture by the Lexfold murder in Austin, and you can see the smiley face, vampire smiley face.
There it is, right there.
The downward pentagram.
That's right there.
I don't know what all that means. I think there's a skull there too. So there's weird stuff out there that people need to take pictures of and memorialize. So please do that. Like, be your own sleuth.
Yeah.
Post it anywhere. Somebody may see something. Like, I don't see everything all the time, and I don't know anything, but like when you go back over some of the stuff, you see something again, you go, oh wow, that's what that means.
Well, what got me as a young man, when I was in high school journalism class, as a senior in high school, we did a project with the sheriff's department, putting together a newspaper for them about all the things the sheriff's department did. And it was and I got to know the chief deputy at the time real well. We went and had lunch. As soon as I graduated, we had lunch one day, and I was starting my newspaper column and going to college. And he said, I'm going to try to bust open this occult stuff that's going on. And that was in the early 90s, coming out of like the Satanic Panic era. And we had kind of known about a park in our area that supposedly had rituals and stuff, and people don't go down there. And he validated that stuff happened there. And he said, I've got a grant to put together an occult crimes investigation unit. And it was a big grant for like the night. I forget, it was like $500,000, which
that's huge.
Like 93. This is around 93. And I remember going, wow. I remember coming home. I still live with my parents, telling my mom and dad, hey, the chief deputy's going to do this occult crime thing. And, some of the stuff you hear about, he said he's going to bust it open. And this is what stuck with me. A week later, I get a call from this guy. And he goes, Chester, man, I just wanted to say it's been nice getting to know you, but I'm going back home. He goes, what? He goes, well, I'm going back to where my home state. He said, so what? He goes, yeah, I got offered a job paying double what I make here.
Wow.
And guess what never happened? The unit. And as a young kid going to journalism school, that stuck with me. Like, that's just too weird not to look at. So sometimes you got to wonder if of course there are people, we see that on the inside of everything from the military to police to law enforcement to whatever, the clergy, whatever. There's always someone on the inside doing something. But I really thank you for your in-depth level of research on these things. What I liked about your documentary, you literally went down the line and told the details of the cases. And you put, when you had an opinion, you said, hey, this is kind of what I think's happening. But a lot of it, you just put a lot of facts out there and let people kind of make up their own conclusions to those facts. And for me, it was like, oh man, I have to go do a show on this or something, because my people, fishermen and stuff, are in the areas this stuff's going down, you know? Yeah. And I tell you this, it messed up the smiley face symbol for me.
Yeah, it messed up for me too. But now you see it everywhere. It's in the art, it's in theaters, it's this whole symbol. So something weird is going on underneath the surface. I don't know. I'm not initiated, so I wouldn't know, but there's weird stuff going on. People need to be careful. It's a different time. You're in a different, it's the third millennium, you know, you're in a different world than it was back in the day. So people need to be really careful.
It's entirely different. And as a person who me and my wife have a ministry for children and teens that are going through struggles, we see stuff that's, if we told the average person, the public, what happens in the house down the street, you know, that we just know from from working with different CPS officers and different things like that or whatever, you go, my God, that kind of abuse is happening. And then you think about the level of organized predation like this, and it's a scary time. But you know, we can't be informed. I'm a follower of Christ. I believe in shining light, and I believe in informing people and letting people know what's going on. And once again, like William posted here, this photo taken with that kind of Dracula looking smiley face there, with some other satanic imagery. If you see something out there, post it, share it, let people know. And before we go here, I want to thank you again for taking time to talk about these cases in Texas and refreshing us on this phenomenon. But you always have some kind of book, investigation, documentary. So what's the latest in William Ramsey Investigates?
Oh, I've just been busy on my podcast. People can check everything out at William Ramsey Investigates. I'm of over 900 episodes. And I'm covering this. You know, I just did a show yesterday with Jim Smith. So I'm trying to keep up with these cases, but just doing other stuff as well. So I've been busy with the podcast, but I have a couple projects I'll be putting out here in the next month or two.
Yeah, good deal. And yeah, same here. Got my wildlife podcast, doing season 2 of the Dark Outdoors podcast. And what a way to kick it off with this one. Wild stuff. Always. Thank you so much for your friendship and for your ability to really cut through the research and bring great stuff to the public. I appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
All right. Cheers. All right, cool.